I never used to come to that coffee shop. It was too far from campus, too tucked away on a side street that always smelled faintly of rain, even when it hadn't rained in weeks. But one afternoon, I stopped by to kill time before meeting a friend. That's when I saw her. She was sitting by the window, a half-read newspaper folded neatly beside her mug. My friend's mom. I recognized her right away. Her hair pinned back in that not-trying way, glasses resting low on her nose. She looked up when the door chimed, and for a second, her eyes met mine. Not recognition, not yet, just a polite glance. I ordered coffee. Black. The barista asked if I wanted room for cream. I almost said yes just to have another word to say, but I shook my head instead. When I turned, she was still watching me, the corner of her mouth caught between thinking and smiling. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said when I passed her table. I paused, adjusting the strap of my bag. "Yeah, just first time." She tapped the folded edge of her newspaper, like she was deciding if I was worth keeping in her morning. "Sit for a minute. If you want." I wanted. Her presence wasn't loud. That's what drew me in, I think. She had the kind of calm that made you pay attention to small things. The way she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly long after the sugar had dissolved, how she traced the rim of the mug with one finger when she was thinking. She asked about classes. I told her. She asked if her son was still late to everything. I laughed, because he was. We traded little stories, easy ones, about nothing much. But what I kept noticing, what kept circling back in my head, was how she remembered. "Black coffee, right? No cream," she said when I got up to order a refill. I nodded, trying not to look too surprised. "Same as your dad, isn't it?" she added. It stopped me. She hadn't seen my dad in years. Maybe she just remembered more than most people did. Later, when the crowd thinned, I pulled out my phone. I typed out a message to a girl I'd been meaning to text back. Typed it, stared at it. Then I let the screen go dark. Across from me, she adjusted her glasses and looked out the window, like she'd caught me in the act of hesitating but wouldn't ask. That silence, that small space where words could have gone, hung heavier than the conversations we'd had. When I finally stood to leave, she folded her newspaper, tucking it into her bag. Her movements were deliberate, but her eyes stayed on me. "You'll keep this between us, won't you?" she said lightly, but not joking. I tried to smile, though my throat tightened a little. "Yeah, of course." She reached for her coffee but didn't drink it, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure whether to let me see more or to end it right there. And then she said it again, softer this time, almost to herself. "This stays between us." I walked out with that line echoing in my head, carrying more weight than it should have. On the way home, my phone buzzed. A message I didn't expect. From her. Just 6 words. "Next time, don't make me ask." I told myself I wasn't going to stop by again. But a week later, I found myself walking past the same cafe, slowing down as if gravity had tilted me toward the door. She was there again, in her usual spot by the window. I knew it wasn't coincidence. She looked up the moment I walked in. "So much for keeping secrets," she said, but her voice softened as she gestured to the empty chair across from her. I sat. The conversation drifted. She asked about my classes, I asked about her work. Nothing remarkable, but in the pauses, there was always something pressing at the edges, something neither of us named. She mentioned she'd been married once, then divorced. Said it the way someone mentions the weather. I nodded, not sure if she wanted me to respond. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked toward the window. Not the leaving, just the years I didn't notice passing. I thought about that later. How someone could live a whole life, raise a family, and still carry a kind of unfinished ache. She leaned across the table to reach for the sugar. Her sleeve brushed my arm, light as air, but enough to scatter my thoughts. I stirred my coffee even though I hadn't added anything. "You remind me of my son's friends," she said after a while. "Always rushing, always impatient." "I wasn't rushing," I said. "You came back, didn't you?" I couldn't tell if it was an accusation or an invitation. Maybe both. That night, I replayed the way she looked at me when she said it. Half warning, half curiosity. I imagined her sitting at home, lights low, pouring tea into a chipped mug, maybe the same way she stirred her coffee too long. I told myself it was just imagination, that I was filling silence with stories. But still, the next time, it wasn't the cafe. It was her kitchen. She'd asked me to carry up some groceries, said her back was sore. Just set them on the counter, she said. The space smelled faintly of oranges and soap. Family photos lined the wall, her son in different stages of boyhood, always grinning like he never doubted the world. She poured us both tea, sliding a mug toward me without asking how I liked it. It's chamomile. Good for the nerves. I laughed. You think I'm nervous? Her eyes lingered on mine just long enough to make me swallow hard. A little. We sat in silence, the steam rising between us. She wrapped both hands around her mug, not drinking, just holding it. I noticed the faint indentation on her finger where a ring used to be. When I stood to leave, she touched my arm. Just fingertips, brief, almost like she hadn't meant to. It could have been nothing. A friendly gesture. But the warmth stayed there, burning quiet and steady, long after I stepped outside. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It shifted the next time I saw her. She opened the door slower, like she wasn't sure if I'd come or if she should let me in at all. Her son was out, she said, as if that mattered. I told her I was just returning the book she'd lent me. She glanced at the cover. You didn't like it. I did. I stopped. My voice caught on the lie. I finished it quicker than I thought. She stepped aside. You can stay a minute. The kitchen light was dimmer than usual, only one lamp in the corner. She set out 2 mugs without asking, the kettle already humming. I leaned against the counter, watching her. The way she reached for the tea bags, careful, deliberate. You shouldn't make this a habit, she said quietly. What tea? Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to the kettle. Coming here. I wanted to ask why she still let me. But the words didn't come. We sat at the table, steam curling between us. Neither of us touched our mugs. She folded the edge of her napkin over and over, smoothing it flat again. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A friend. I didn't move. Her gaze shifted down, catching the silence that pressed against us. You're young. Too young for this. I shook my head, but nothing came out. Just the faint sound of the clock ticking down the hall. Then, footsteps. A voice calling up from outside the apartment. Her neighbor, fumbling with keys, humming to herself. She froze, hand hovering above the table like she'd been caught, even though no one had seen. The kettle hissed softly behind us. I whispered, Do you want me to go? She didn't answer right away. Finally, no. Just be quiet for a second. So we sat there, not moving, waiting for the sound of the other door closing down the hall. When it did, she let out a breath that shook slightly. Something had changed in that pause. The air felt different, heavier. She reached across the table, not far, just close enough that her fingers rested near mine. Not touching, just there. I looked down, then back at her. Why keep asking me back? Her lips parted, but the answer never came. She pressed them together again, eyes fixed on the table as though the wood grain held the truth she couldn't say aloud. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. I could feel her behind me, close enough that the warmth of her presence brushed the back of my neck. I turned, halfway, words rising, almost spilling out. She did the same, our faces inches apart, her breath catching. But then she blinked, pulled back just enough to turn it into something else, something safer. Take the book back again, she said softly, slipping it into my hands. Maybe you'll finish it slower this time. The door closed. My palms were still warm from a touch that had never actually happened. We ended up walking one evening. Not planned. She'd finished errands. I'd just gotten off work. We crossed paths outside her building, both hesitating like maybe we shouldn't acknowledge it. But she smiled, small, tired, and asked if I wanted to walk with her to the park. The air was cool, dusk settling in, lamps humming as they flickered on. We didn't talk much at first, just the sound of our steps on the pavement, her bag shifting against her shoulder. Finally, she said, "You know this looks wrong, don't you?" I swallowed. Wrong to who? To anyone watching. I wanted to ask if she cared, but the way she clutched her bag strap, knuckles pale, told me she did. We sat on a bench. A street light buzzed overhead. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, staring at the gravel. "I've spent years keeping people from noticing me," she said finally. "Making myself smaller, quieter, easier to forget." Her voice didn't crack, but something in it felt splintered. I wanted to reach for her hand. Instead, I pushed mine into my pockets. Useless. "You're not easy to forget," I said. She glanced at me then, quick and sharp, like the words had landed too close. A couple passed behind us, laughing, and she straightened up, brushing at her sleeve as though erasing the moment. "Don't say things like that," she muttered. "Why not?" "Because I'll believe you." The silence that followed pressed against my chest. She looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe the fading light. Maybe the weeks of half-conversations. I keep imagining things. My voice barely carried. Like staying. Like you wanting me here. Her breath caught. She tilted her head, just enough for me to see her eyes glint in the lamplight. "That's dangerous," she whispered. "For who?" "For both of us." We sat there, neither moving. A moth circled the lamp above, frantic in its orbit. She finally let out a low laugh, almost bitter. "You're too young to know how heavy secrets get. You carry them long enough, they change the shape of you." I leaned forward, trying to meet her gaze. "Then let me carry one." Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. Her hands twisted together in her lap, as if she was holding something in place. For a moment, everything felt still. Just her, me, the distance between us shrinking by breaths. Her shoulder brushed mine, barely. I couldn't tell if she meant it, or if it was just gravity pulling us closer. I thought she might turn her face to me then, that maybe this was the moment. But instead, she asked quietly, almost to herself, "What happens to us if we don't stop?" After that night on the bench, I thought something had shifted, that the next time we saw each other, we wouldn't dance around it anymore. But days passed, then a week. No texts, no casual run-ins. I checked the cafe once, twice, empty. When I finally saw her again, it was at the grocery store. Fluorescent lights, crowded aisles, the smell of oranges and floor cleaner. She had a basket hooked over her arm, head down like she was trying not to be seen. I almost called her name. Almost. But then I noticed she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, older, maybe late 50s. Not touching her, but close enough to matter. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes caught mine just for a second, then moved away like she hadn't. That night, I kept my phone beside me, screen lighting up every time I convinced myself she'd explain. Nothing came. I typed a message. Deleted it. Typed again. Did I do something? Backspaced. Left only her name in the bar. Never pressed send. 2 days later, she texted first. Just, busy week. Take care of yourself. Polite. Distant. Like we were starting over, only worse, because now we both knew what wasn't being said. I stopped going to the cafe. Walked different streets. Tried not to think about how my chest tightened every time my phone buzzed. Then one evening, I found myself outside her building without meaning to. I stood at the door, staring at the buzzer. My finger hovered. All I had to do was press. Through the glass, I saw her shadow moving past the window. She paused, hand against the curtain, as if she felt me there. For a moment, I thought she might open it. She didn't. Later, my friend mentioned offhand that his mom had been seeing someone new. Some guy from her work, he said, distracted, scrolling his phone. Guess it's serious. I nodded, pretending I hadn't heard. That night, I sat in my room staring at the half-read book she'd made me take back. The bookmark's still where I'd left it. I opened my phone again, typed. Tell me it didn't mean nothing. My thumb hovered over send. I locked the screen instead. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And the silence between us grew heavier, word by word, until it felt like maybe this was all it was meant to be. It happened on a Sunday evening. I wasn't planning on seeing her. I convinced myself I'd stop trying, but I caught her outside, setting a bag of recycling down by the curb. She looked up, startled, like she hadn't expected anyone to catch her in something so ordinary. For a second, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of bottles clinking in the bag between us. "You've been avoiding me," I said finally. Her shoulders tightened, but she didn't deny it. "I thought it was better that way." "Better for who?" She flinched at the question. Not visibly, just a small shift, like she was holding something in her chest that wanted out. We ended up in her kitchen again, both standing instead of sitting. She poured tea she didn't drink. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You keep saying that," I replied. My voice came out sharper than I meant. "But you don't mean it." Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. She took a breath, let it out. "I don't know what I mean anymore." The silence stretched. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Finally, she set her hands flat on the counter, steadying herself. "I like the way you look at me," she said, voice low. "It scares me, but it makes me feel like I exist again. Like someone sees me." My chest tightened. All the things I'd been holding back pressed against my throat. "You do exist," I whispered. "More than anyone I know." Her hands curled against the counter's edge. I could see the war in her eyes, between stepping back and stepping closer. "If we keep this going," she said slowly, "I'll lose something. Maybe everything. And if we don't." Her mouth trembled into something almost like a smile, almost like regret. "Then I'll lose this." The room felt small, the air heavy with the weight of a decision neither of us knew how to make. I moved first, but only halfway. Just enough to stand close enough that her sleeve brushed mine. Close enough to let her feel the choice was hers. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and let her hand rest lightly against my arm. Not pulling me in, not pushing me away. Just there. For a moment, that was enough. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet but steady. She whispered one word, fragile but certain. "Okay." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a promise. Just a fragile thread stretched between us, enough to hold the silence in place without breaking it. And in that quiet, I understood that sometimes resolution isn't about crossing the line. It's about standing on it together. Time passed. Weeks, then months. Life didn't stop, not for either of us. She worked, I finished classes, and we learned how to live without rushing toward the line we'd once hovered on. It wasn't sudden. It never was. Sometimes I'd catch her on her way out in the morning, her hair still damp from the shower, keys jingling in her hand. We'd trade small words, ordinary ones, before heading in opposite directions. Other times I'd hear her laugh through the thin walls when she was on the phone with her sister. I didn't intrude. I just let it be part of the air around me. But little by little, the distance softened. One evening, late autumn, we ended up back on that same park bench. No plan, just the overlap of two routines. She sat first, coat buttoned tight, her breath clouding in the cool air. I joined her, keeping the quiet company. "Remember the last time we were here?" she said, eyes on the gravel. I nodded. "You asked what happens if we don't stop." Her smile was small, private. I did. We didn't need to answer it this time. We both knew. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was in the small consistencies. Her setting out 2 mugs in the kitchen without asking which one I wanted. Me bringing her black coffee at 8:47 a.m. when the cafe finally felt like ours again. She never said thank you outright. Just a nod, a glance, the kind of acknowledgement that went deeper than words. And every now and then, when the silence between us grew heavy, she'd reach for my hand under the table. Not always. Just enough. Life didn't turn cinematic. Bills still piled up. Her son still ran late to everything. I still left texts unsent when I didn't know how to explain myself. But there was a warmth now, woven into the fabric of the ordinary. One night, as she poured chamomile tea into chipped mugs, she caught me staring. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "What?" she asked. I shrugged, smiling back. "Just thinking how you're not that easy to forget." Her hand brushed mine as she set the mug down. Good, she said quietly. I think about that sometimes. The way we never named what this is, never carved it into something neat and defined. We didn't need to. Because when she looked at me across the table, steam curling between us, I felt the same thing I'd felt that very first day in the cafe. Like someone had noticed me in a way no one else ever had. And that was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?